We were in therapy twice a week with some of them at different points of their journey. And sometimes pets were the only thing that felt like really gave them the comfort that they needed during a really hard time.
So, welcome to another podcast with me, Brian, your host, and Blever with Barbara is the podcast. And we've got an amazing guest today who's doing some great things with trauma, healing, and the remarkable bonds between humans and animals, which I will testify for as an owner of a mad as a bag of bees rescue dog. That saved my sanity. But I wanted to welcome Heather Gibson, all the way from the States. Hi, Heather. What I like to do with all my guests, if you've seen this, is rather than me sort of go on a diatribe about who you are, I'd like you to introduce yourself. So background, where you are at the moment, what's the reason behind your mission, etc. So I'll leave the floor to you, and then obviously we'll get on with the rest of the podcast, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show. So
You're welcome.
I guess just a quick background on me. I was a foster parent for children, and we were foster parents for over a decade. And we were trying to kind of help these kids through trauma. And we noticed the power of the bond between the animals that we had. And it led me on a journey I never expected. I started breeding animals. I bred both cats and dogs with the outcome that I was looking for, to have great emotional support therapy for anybody that had these animals. So I started small. I've grown. Now I only do dogs. I do mini golden retrievers, which are a mix of golden retriever, spaniel, and poodle. I train them also. So we do some training if people want it. And then I have gone on to train other breeders. So I have a breeder training community, how to be more ethical and run a breeding business. Some people don't like to call it a business, but anytime I feel like you're working with customers, I feel like you need to treat it like a business. And we also are launching a nonprofit. I've already been doing some work with our local foster care foundation because of where our kids came from. So we've been donating to them and to different groups that work with veterans. And so we decided to make it official. So we're working on our nonprofit status right now.
Excellent stuff. I mean, I got to say, when I was contacted by yourselves, I was sort of cock a hoop, really, because being an owner of a rescue dog who came into my life at a point, so obviously I get your mission and how that works with children who, particularly children going through the care system, and there's a lot of trauma potentially there and a lot of issues as well around self-trust and confidence, is I separated from my husband and I needed focus because my anxiety disorder was out of the roof and I was quite suicidal for a while. There was a lot of suicidal ideations that I went through. And I got the dog against the better judgment of my therapist, because she thought that I won't be able to cope with a rescue dog because my anxiety was off the scale. But I said, no, I think it will work. And she was amazed. She couldn't believe it. It does work. So I get, from my point of view as a person, I get how all this works, because just that unconditional, non-judgmental approach that dogs and cats, not just because I'm a dog person, it doesn't mean to say I don't like cats. I get that all thing, because it's just great. And when you come home from work and you've had a bad day, or you've been out somewhere and your dog's waiting or your cat's waiting, it's just the greatest, isn't it? And I've seen pictures of your little dogs and they are so cute. It's a good job you're in America, because I don't know if I'll be able to resist looking for one, because they're just beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And that's exactly what we saw in our home. And when you talk about trauma, I mean, we had a lot of trauma in our home. My kids are all adults now, and I've gotten their permission to kind of share their stories. But we had two girls that were removed by a SWAT team after their dad was involved in a double homicide. And the boyfriend of one of the murdered people kidnapped the girls with their mom in retaliation for the murder. And so we've seen a lot of kids come through with trauma. And really for these two girls in particular, that was really just the piece that you can present to society and they understand the trauma of that. But there was a lot of trauma before that. And all of our kids that came through dealt with a lot of trauma. And then we have 4 kids that we've adopted from foster care and 3 biological kids. And the truth is that my biological family also struggles with depression and anxiety. It's in our genes. So I knew firsthand what it was like to struggle with some of those things. And so it was amazing to see the difference that pets made in our kids' lives. I mean, we were in therapy twice a week with some of them at different points of their journey. And Sometimes pets were the only thing that felt like really gave them the comfort that they needed during a really hard time.
It's strange, isn't it? Because I didn't have a pet from the age of, I think last time I had a dog, I was something like the age of 12, possibly. And then I was, well, 47 when I got Barbara. I I suffer trauma myself, blood sexual abuse. I've noticed it, found out I'm autistic. And obviously there's a real scientific proven sort of connection between autism, and if you've got kids with autism and they've got that engagement with a pet of some form. And when I got the dog, and then once we obviously balanced the self out, because he was a rescue and he came with his own trauma, because rescue dogs, and they're just like rescue kids in the flex. They come with a whole heap of baggage. And as with children, probably, I don't know if you see the correlation. I'm going off on a tangent here, that children don't really open up and dogs can't talk. So you have to try and figure it out from just working with them, how this is going to pan out, what's good, what's not good, what's bad, what's not bad, and, go through that way. Do you see that correlation between your experience in fostering and adopting and then obviously now having the dogs?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of rescue animals myself when I was kids, and I see the correlation there, and especially kids that were pre-verbal when they had their trauma, meaning that they weren't speaking then. A lot of times they don't even know where the trauma came from exactly. And you can see that in animals too. Like sometimes they'll flinch or they'll have a hard time around someone with glasses or a certain sound, or you can see the same things in kids with trauma as well.
It is sad, isn't it? But obviously you've seen something there and thought, right, let's just work on that. More than just saying, get your child a cat for a pet and it might help them. You've seen, obviously, this is an opportunity to spread it out. And I think that's a great thing that you're doing. So you spent years working with both animals and children who have experienced difficult circumstances we've just explained. What have those experiences taught you about trauma that most people still don't fully understand?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, anyone that's been through trauma, you come away with that understanding and knowing an ability to see the world in a different way, really. I think we have more compassion, hopefully, when you've been through something hard. But I think me in particular, over and over again, the power of the pet in the lives of the kids that I worked with that were traumatized, and kind of in my own life to help me through, because there's secondhand trauma being around someone that's been through heavy trauma and trying to help them through that. So, for example, my daughter was at a kind of a critical time. She was just struggling. She was in therapy. And I remember coming to her and she looked so sad and lonely. And I just said to her, hey, you look like you're really struggling. Is there anything I can do to help? And, can you talk to me about this? And she was, kind of was looking down and shook her head. And I said, okay, well, what can we do? Who can we talk to? Where can we go? Being the mom, the problem solver, trying to fix things. I said, do we need another therapy session? What do we need? Who can you talk to? And she kind of said no to everything until I said, okay, well, what can we do? Who can you talk to? And I remember she looked at me and she said, Mom, I can talk to the cat. And I thought, that was really my moment of knowing how much power pets had. And like you said, now the research backs it up. There's quite a bit of research out there that's fascinating. I don't know if all your listeners have heard, but for example, the American Heart Association published something in 2019 that said that dog owners have a 24% lower risk of dying from any cause and a 31% risk of cardiovascular disease compared to non-dog owners. So they're starting to quantify what you and I were kind of seeing anecdotally in our lives.
I love facts and I love things like that, because that's what my audience loves as well, because it rationalizes any claims, because obviously there's still a lot of people that will doubt that having a dog or a cat, or even a goldfish or a budgie is great. If it's something that you can talk to, even if you are not living alone, and as you say, your daughter obviously felt more easy talking to the cat about things, and it just proves that, doesn't it? Because it does help massively. And with my situation with my dog, lots of people, not just the therapist, did say, I think you're really going to struggle with this, because this dog my dog still is slightly, but massively reactive, violently so. And we went through a very tough period with him, biting and things. And he's still here 5 years later. But I suppose that's what maybe some of your foster children went through, not biting, but, kicking back and real sort of volatile interactions as they
Absolutely.
do. But I love to hear the facts that people are now going, well, actually, you know, I think this is a good thing. Because at the end of the day, we are animals as self. We're a mammal. And most mammals can get on with other mammals unless you're a lion and you're an antelope, and then clearly not. But mammals do engage with other mammals, and they seem to be happy enough unless they're being chased by a lion. But we seem to not, not everybody understands the power of pet ownership, do they?
Yes. Well, it does have to be the right pet ownership. So I can imagine some of your listeners are going, oh my gosh, I have this dog. I hate them. Like or, this cat, and they drive me nuts. Like, how could they bring more joy in my life? And so it does have to be the right match for sure. But when you get the right match, there is something magical about it.
No, that is true. I get that. Obviously, we do see these awful cases of cruelty that
Yes.
people inflict on animals. So it's not for everybody. But I do believe that a lot of these cruelty cases are caused because the person is so traumatized by things in their lives that when we're trauma victims, I'm a trauma victim. There has been periods where I've been a very angry person, and I don't think a dog in my life would have been the greatest thing for me because I didn't really like myself and I didn't like the world. And there's a lot of people, and I think they probably should refrain from getting cats and dogs and things like that until they come to a point where they think, actually, I think I'll be a great sort of cat mum or dog.
Yep. That's a very good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the match has to be right, not just for the human, but it has to be right for the animal. And that's one of the things that I think maybe people don't think about. Like if the match isn't right for either side, it shouldn't happen.
No, that's very true. And I think that's where we have a lot of these dog attacks, particularly. People are getting dogs and they don't really, even a little cockapoo is a dangerous thing to have if you don't know how to control it. It can still cause a lot of damage to a person, can a cockapoo, if it gets you in the face, can't it?
Yep.
So many people see pets as companions, Heather, but you witnessed them playing a much deeper role in people's lives, obviously, we're discussing. What is it about animals that allows them to reach people when words, therapy, or even family sometimes cannot? What are your experiences of that, and what do you think?
Yeah, so we've kind of alluded to it a little bit. It's the fact that they love us unconditionally. The right animal and the right human together, there's just this bond with this unconditional love. And it's actually backed by science again. So science says that if we spend 10 minutes petting a cat or a dog, it lowers our cortisol. They've also shown there's oxytocin that's released by staring into a pet's eyes. And it actually, some of the science is showing it goes both ways. Like, it helps the animal and it helps the human. So there really is a physical, measurable bond that's there. And again, somehow they don't have the expectations of us like another human might. We're not expected to speak or say things, like sometimes you can sit quietly with an animal and have that connection. And they just, as long as they're not abused or, the relationship is right, they're waiting for you to come home all the time. You can have a bad day and be grouchy, but they're waiting for you to come home. And somehow that just melts through layers of, sometimes we put up walls when we've been through trauma. We put up layers of protection, and somehow pets melt right through that.
That's true, isn't it? I know people with horses and no dogs, and it's the same. It doesn't make any difference how big it is. If you've got a love for a non-human, we'll call it, and there is obviously no issues where, to be fair, even conflict, because this is the thing I'll always say about my relationship with Barbara. He came with anxiety and I already had anxiety, and those two things together, you wouldn't put two humans together in going through anxiety, because it's not really going to work very well unless you've got somebody always constantly refereeing between the two, because you can drive each other's anxiety even further. But it almost, and I think I don't know whether you see this with the children that you in the past fostered who have got maybe are anxious. I don't know how they wouldn't be anxious if they were kidnapped by people. They would probably have anxiety or some form or another. Is you sort of balance out the anxiety when it's a pet. I think when it's a human, you can drive anxiety higher and higher and higher. But with a pet, because they don't use words. Yeah, my dog used to bite me when he saw another dog. But I never reacted to the dog and go, if that was a human that hit me because they're anxious, which does happen, sadly, then that makes me want to hit them back. But with a dog, biting you because they're anxious about another dog, it almost balanced out that need to escalate my anxiety higher, because obviously it's a non-speaking. It looks at me and goes, I need you. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to bite you because you're in my way. Do you know? And
Yeah.
that sort of,
It sounds like you had a special relationship with your dog. And I think what it sounds like made it work is that you were really there and you decided to do whatever it took to help that dog through that. And I think that's amazing. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. Like, I can see why
no.
your therapist would have concerns, because sometimes even when you put an anxious dog with an anxious person, if the person isn't willing to kind of put the dog first and really look out for the dog, it can make them both more anxious. But I love that you were able to stand up for him. You were able to see him for what he needed, and it actually helped you out of your issues too. I love that.
Do you see that then with your sort of mission? Because ultimately, I know your dogs have been born into a nice environment and they're sort of nurtured and trained, and they don't go through what the abuse my dog went through. But ultimately, without that, they're still going to be helping your sort of hope. I'm assuming what you're hoping is veterans, for example. You mentioned the veterans, haven't you? And we'll probably touch on that later. Is they're going to have PTSD probably, and that's anxiety is I've had PTSD and it's not a nice thing to have. You can ultimately see that, can't you? Because to get the best out of your animal, your dog, will say, you have to then put them first. You do have to put them first, because ultimately that dog eventually is just going to shut down and you're not going to get what you wanted the dog for in the first place, which is companionship and that unwavering love. Because eventually a dog will shut down once it doesn't get what it's looking for, just like a human. Is that what you find as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So we work, like you said, really hard at creating the best environment we can for our dogs from the beginning. So we screen for genetic temperament, we screen for genetic
Mm,
issues. And then when we have puppies, we actually put them through very specific protocols from the day they're
mm-hmm,
like 3 days old until they leave us. And then we train our owners how to really build those neural pathways so they're more confident, outgoing, social.
mm,
But there's still that piece that the owner still has to put anyone first. They need to go out the bathroom. They need to be walked. They need, to be fed. And sometimes we have to be careful because obviously we don't want to put the dog in a situation where they would get neglected. But sometimes that gives the person a reason for getting up, a reason for going out,
mm-hmm,
a reason for doing what they need to. And specifically with vets, I would say that I see a lot of them just needing that stability out in the world after they've been through something horrific and they're dealing with PTSD, and they have a dog that does pressure therapy, which really just means they lean into them and put pressure on them and kind of ground them back to the moment they're in. It gives them the capability to go out and experience the world in a way that was harder for them before that. So
mm-hmm.
I've seen them literally change the lives of people and open up their world again so they can do things.